Hello, everybody. Episode of Dave's Garage, although I'm not in the garage because I wanted to be able to mount my camera the way over a desk here so I could illustrate this. So a couple things. This is going to have two components to it. One is to describe what it is and why these things work and why you might want them on your bike. But then also for the MT-10 guys to see if you know or have any thoughts or feedback on this. So what this is a steering damper. This is the OEM one from Yamaha. This sits up underneath the headlight area and mounted up to the lower triple and then onto one of the forks. There's mounts where this screws in and a bolt goes through here. And what it does is then as the handlebars turn, this thing moves in either direction, okay? And it's got a low speed and a high speed damping circuit, which in this case I think is causing a bit of an issue, and we'll go over why in a minute. This is what comes on the bike. Now, other bikes like Honda, I think even Suzuki, other companies, they have ones that are electronically controlled, so it's proportional to speed. So when you're in a parking lot, the handlebars are nice and loose and easy to maneuver. When you're going fast and more likely to be taking the hits and stuff, that's when they tighten up. It has a spool valve that's controlled by the ECU. This one is just a set it and forget it type damper. There is no adjustment. So what happens is, and why you want one in the first place is, you don't want a steering damper installed. A lot of people say, well, you don't need it if your suspension's set up right. Not true. Not having your suspension set up right can absolutely cause head shake and tank slappers. So you always want to fix that problem first. However, to think that, well, if that's set up right, you never need it. Well, go find a bike in a race paddock, including MotoGP, that is not having a damper on it. They all have dampers. Because no matter how well your suspension's set up, when the front tire's bouncing around or on the side of the tire, you're hitting bumps, it's skimming the ground, which is where I experience the issues on the MT-10 we'll talk about. You're giving steering input. You have suspension on your bike. You have forks and you have a shock, or shocks, depending on the bike. And that is to give controlled movement to maintain the contact patch of your tire on the road and keep the tire connected to the road to keep traction and absorb those bumps. The object of suspension is to take those kind of vertical sort of movements and smooth them out and make the ride compliant so that the bike handles properly. A steering damper is the same thing. This is a suspension component, but instead of being linear up and down in more vertical motions, it's the side-to-side movement of the, whatchamacallit. Quiet! They've been quiet all morning. The second I start recording, there they go. So anyway, what we have is this component. Now here's what I noticed. I noticed it on my bike because the first 1, 2, 3 gears, the MT-10, now that it's tuned with stock gearing, wheelies all the freaking time. And that front tire is constantly skipping off the ground and produces some head shake. And a few times it was a little more than I would have liked considering it's got a steering damper. And I played with the suspension and ultimately I'm going to need to get a better shock. And I'm waiting for a price quote from GMD CompuTrack. I think we're going to do a Wilbur's maybe a Nitron or a K-Tech shock in the back and then K-Tech spring and valving up front. We're going to do it up proper for track days and stuff. But the bike still comes with the steering damper. And I think it's because they know with the steering geometry and how wheelie prone it is that it could get a little squirrely up front. Here's what I noticed with this one. It's got a low speed circuit. So it's actually fairly light to push and pull that. So when you're going slow, movements left and right, it's fine. Watch what happens when you're going to hear a click. Hear that? So as you're going, it's working slowly. It's on the slow damping circuit. But as soon as it exceeds a certain, I guess there's something spring-loaded in here, and then high-speed valve kicks in. So I can start pushing it. And as soon as I speed it up, it immediately clicks. I don't think that that's a good solution. That's my theory. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I noticed that it goes light, and then it hits that wall. Now what happens, if you're just pushing it one direction, it's easy, and then it firms. See, I can move it quickly. But as soon as I try to go past a certain speed, but it's not consistent on this unit. Sometimes I can go quickly, like there, I just pulled it quickly in the other direction, and then partway through it grabs it. So this, when it does that with the high and low speed, instead of just being a set it and it's one speed no matter what, there's a gap. And if I go back and forth really quickly, like I'm going over bumps and the thing's doing the jimmies, So there's a gap. It's not fully tight. It tightens up, and then when I go the other direction, it loosens for a second, and then it tightens up again. So there's like this wiggle room in the middle that allows this, because it doesn't have the same tension as that high speed. Once I hit that and it's still pushing against it, I can push as hard as I want. If I push slowly, look how quickly I can go. But then I hit a certain speed. See how it was nice and smooth? But now it takes more pressure and it doesn't move as quickly. But that transition of going back and forth, it's doing that. There's about an 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch gap, and that's enough to let the bars do this, because it's being underdamped in that situation. So I put on a different steering damper, one that I had in a box. I bought 2 for the Speed Twin, and I ended up going with an Olin's looking one. But I've got another one there that is about the same size and weight as this, and it just bolted right up, but I can adjust it. But there is no high and low speed. It's the same throughout the rev range, which is what most of them are anyway. I think this one, they were trying to make it feel light, but they know that front end gets a little squirrely. And so they wanted that high speed damper in there to really kind of clamp that down when it engages. The problem is it just doesn't engage it. I would rather have it just be the same all the way through. You're pushing it and you feel that clunk. And when I go in the other direction, it travels a little bit before it re-engages in that high speed. So in the middle, that would be rocking back and forth like that when it's on that easy, kind of low damped. And I think that's where I'm getting that little bit of squirreliness. It's not enough that it's gotten out of sorts, but a couple times I was like, all right, it wasn't anywhere near a tank slapper, but it's enough to shake your confidence and kind of unnerve you. So I'm using that one I got that I bought for the Triumph and ended up not using because it's roughly the same size, and I can dial it in and play with it and adjust it. And on that, the downside of that is when I'm sitting there in a parking lot just moving the wheels, I'm going to feel a little more resistance, but I don't care. I mean, that's what most of the bikes that have a steering damper feel like anyway. So this one, I think, unless mine's just defective, I don't know if anybody else with an MT-10, I don't know if the R1 uses the same model. There's the number on it. But let me know. That to me doesn't seem normal. I don't know. It's like it's easy, and then it just hits a certain speed, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you got to really go fast. But I see that, and I'm like, no wonder I'm feeling squirrely up front. It's not a consistent, smooth pull. It's constantly going from light stiff, light to stiff, light to stiff, light to stiff, depending on the speed. And it's like it can't react fast enough sometimes. I'd rather just have it always the same, no matter what I'm pushing, pulling, no matter what speed. It just gives that same cushion, that same slowdown. So we'll see. I'll go ride later and see if I notice any difference. And at least on that one, I can adjust it. This has no adjustment capability. These screws, I think, if I took those out, those are to pressurize it or fill it with oil. Those don't adjust at all. So I don't believe that there's any adjustment on there. I feel like this thing moves in a little bit. It's like spring-loaded or something. Yeah, it moves. I don't know what the hell that is. But, the one I put on there is just a cheap $40 Amazon one, but I've actually used those on my ZX6R and had them out on track, and the thing worked great. I may upgrade to something a little bit nicer, but I don't think like this. I mean, this isn't exactly an expensive part. So if the other one works better, I'll let you guys know. But if you have used one of these, definitely let me know what you think about it doing that. Is that normal to have that gap? And do you think that having that sort of gap where it moves freely in between one direction and the other when you go back and forth, that to me feels like that's where that little bit of thing is happening that takes your little bit of confidence out when you start feeling the front get squirrely like that. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know what your thoughts are, and if that's normal, if you've got one. It's 2 screws to pop it off. I mean, I hate to ask you to try it, but see if yours does that, or if you have changed yours out for this reason, let me know that too. So anyway, we'll talk to you folks later. Like, share, and subscribe.